Relationships aren't always sunshine and rainbows. Just like in nature, you can't have rainbows without a little rain.
Journey with us
Shani Goodson.
and Dr. Sunjata as we share stories and insights about our thriving, unconventional love life and our unique take on relationships and consensual non-monogamy. What up, what up, what up? We're back. Episode 3 of SunShan and Rainbows.
Season 2.
Season 2, episode 3. How you feeling today?
Pretty good. Pretty good. I hope y'all like our setup for this season. It's fun. I feel like it's more comfy. It's giving talk show.
Yeah, you like the couch? You like the yellow?
It's the sunshine. That's what we're going for here at the
Yeah.
yellow couch.
Yes. And of course, you see the sunshine trying to get through the windows back there. But I see you sipping on your coffee this morning. You're getting the boost you need.
Yeah, it's like my morning ritual. It's my morning ritual. It's how I become a human in the morning.
Yeah. I had some as well, and it was good. I'm not a coffee every day person, but I figured I would have some today coming into the show, give me a little more energy. So yeah, let's get about it. Talk about it. Like, what's today's show gonna be about?
What is it going to be about? I feel like this can be an interesting topic, maybe a sensitive topic also for some people. For you too, a little bit, I think. There's some little
Yeah.
sore spots here and there.
Indeed. We're talking about metamour relationships.
What is a metamour?
So a metamour is your partner's partner or your love's love. So for example, Shani and I are in a nesting life partnership, and anyone that Shani dates or is in a relationship with outside of me would be considered my metamour.
Which is interesting because, so this is always interesting to me because it's really only for romantic relationships, right? Like you only count someone as your metamour if it's a romantic relationship. But because I kind of lean more toward relationship anarchy, I really wonder why this doesn't apply to like deep friendships.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
like I wonder how come you don't consider yourself a metamour of like my deep friendships,
yeah,
the people who I'm like deeply friendly with, deeply platonic with,
yeah.
because you're still gonna have to include them in life in ways. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and now that you bring that up, it kind of feels like even within the polyamorous space, this is kind of a form of like a hierarchy in a sense that we're putting those romantic relationships on more of a pedestal.
Yeah, because they get their own special term,
Yeah.
So yes, it feels a little hierarchical, but I'm okay with it because I do, how I feel about labels.
Hmm.
I feel like they help us, because they give us the common language, but
Yeah.
they're also kind of limiting.
Yeah. Especially for people who lean more RA, relationship anarchy,
Yeah.
like we do. So for a lot of polyamorous people, and quite frankly, most polyamorous people that I've come into contact with, um, they are still hierarchical in a lot of ways, and
Yes.
these titles matter and they fit
Yeah.
and it feels good, but I can understand why you would question it in that way and bring that awareness.
I'm always gonna question the labels. Feel like that's my role.
And then
That's one of my roles.
you could be like me, you can create new labels, which I do. So maybe don't be surprised if y'all find if we get a new label for this, to match that RA energy, or if we just say, you know what, why does it need a label at all?
It's kind of funny. What's interesting about metamour relationships is I feel like they can be a source of complexity and difficulty for a lot of people
Mhm,
in polyamory.
mhm,
And I think that has a lot to do with how we're conditioned in a lot of ways
mhm.
because we're still conditioned um to be competitive and hierarchical when it comes to our romantic love,
Yeah.
that a lot of times it causes tension, right? It causes like friction,
Hmm.
whereas if we didn't have that conditioning and if we were able to really unlearn that type of stuff, I feel like metamor relationships wouldn't be so um, touchy, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
So yeah, let's get into some experiences of meta relationships. I'm gonna start a little bit here because I feel like my first meta experience was very positive. I feel like um so the first meta I ever had in this space was very welcoming. I literally met the person, she was married to the person who I was dating. And I only met him because she introduced us, like
Yeah.
via Facebook. And that's actually how we got connected also. She
Yeah.
also introduced us that way.
She
But
was and she was actually my partner at the time as
she was
well.
also his partner at the time,
Mhm.
and it was like that energy is so not hierarchical, not competitive, that it
Mhm.
feels really good, right? She's like, hey, I like this guy, maybe you would like him too.
Mhm.
And when I was dating her partner at the time, it wasn't Sunjata yet, but when I was dating her partner at the time, she was just so open and like, hey, let's be friends, let's be tribe. I have 3 kids. She was like, your kids can move in, like you and your kids can move in. I'm gonna build you a house. Like that was her energy, you know. She was like, let's hang out, let's be friends, come
Yeah.
do this. I'm so glad you taking my man off my hands, kind of energy.
Yeah.
And it was in a fun way, in a really sweet and open way. And so I kind of had this idea that, oh, okay, this is what metas are like. Like, yay. I
Yeah.
can't wait, because that was how I wanted life to be with my metas. And so she was really fun in that way. I feel like she was such a good meta.
Mhm.
Great first experience for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I could share that. My first meta experience was really challenging right off the rip. And I think that really what comes into it is, all of our individual journeys in this non-monogamy space, we're consistently confronted with having to face any internal, feelings around jealousy, possessiveness, envy, and all these different things. And I think everyone is at a different place with that, on their journey. And I think when I got started with my first partner, that was also partnered, um, her partner really struggled with our relationship. Um, and it caused a lot of upheaval, very early on in terms of what I was seeing her go through, that challenged our relationship in a lot of ways. And
So it challenged your relationship and her other relationship.
yeah, it was challenging on both ends. For me watching what she was going through, having to navigate, what she was going through at home
Mhm.
because of the ways that her and our relationship was thriving, and it wasn't something that her established partner was used to. He wasn't used to her like being into someone, and these are her words, being into someone in the ways that she was into me, and our relationship developing at the rate that it was kind of like developing at, in terms of us getting really close and spending time together. And I think it felt threatening and scary, and some of those internal feelings were being triggered inside of him around, again, fears around, what is he going to lose? And I think all these things are natural. I don't have any like blame, shame energy. Um, I think that because I've experienced these things in different ways myself, but in that situation, it was definitely very challenging right from the jump. So my first experience, initially, and throughout was really challenging, but there were some positives that I'll share as well as we move forward. But yeah.
Okay. As we move forward, we moving forward. We're going. We still going.
So I guess you started with some positives. So for me, the interesting thing about what I would share is like it's complex. There wasn't like For me, there wasn't like this one meta situation where it was all positive and this one meta situation where it was like all challenging or negative. It was like within those meta relationships, there was positives and negatives, and you know, I've had let me talk about the positives. I would say the positives that I've experienced within my meta dynamics is when me and a meta collaborated to support and care for and celebrate our shared love. So both of my meta experiences were with women who were nested and married, with other men. So, I think there's some like innate possessiveness and jealousy and envy that we carry as men, generally speaking, because of our conditioning. And while both of those situations, um, had challenges, they both also had times where we were able to, plan, celebrations for our shared loves. We traveled, and there were times where we traveled together in support of our shared love and maybe some other loves, and we just had like group trips and things that went really well, in a certain dynamic. Um, there were times that we got together on certain holidays, birthdays, and put together, outings or trips for our shared love. And it felt really good to me to be able to give that woman in our lives that experience around having two, cishet men um, show up for her in that way, which I think is very unconventional. So for me, there was something gratifying about, you know, bucking convention and collaborating with another cishet man to focus on a woman and give her the attention, and celebrate her in that way that I enjoyed.
I'm wondering what makes somebody a meta to you. You said both of your meta situations were with women who were nested. You never had any meta situations with me? You have, but because I don't really like get into the labels as much and the
Hmm.
partnership as much as the other women in your life
Hmm.
have,
Hmm.
I feel like you don't count the people who I date as metas a little bit. So it's kind of interesting because you have had meta experiences with me, but they don't seem to like count as much because of like the relationship anarchy approach. To me,
Mm.
that's how I'm kind of hearing what you're saying.
Well,
You
um,
kind of it's an interesting one now I'm thinking because I have like I have an interesting relationship with a woman
hmm,
and I absolutely think y'all are metas.
okay,
Um, very much so.
yeah,
And I think maybe you've never thought of it like that before.
yeah. Well, I think for me, coming into this, you're right. I think that because you move in such a fluid, open, in and out, like there's time where you're like high touch with a person where y'all are spending time together, and then there's times where there's more space. It does, and then there's like you said, you don't bring the labels in. Um, I think that's why my experiences with you don't jump to the forefront of my mind when I think about those meta experiences
And I actually
in
think
that way.
because of the way that, we both approach relationships now,
Hmm.
it doesn't feel as challenging, right?
Yeah.
Because the situations that you had previously were much more rooted in hierarchy, were much more rooted in labels and
Yep.
partnership. And so they were more challenging
Yeah.
than the meta situations that you have with me because mine just aren't rooted in that same way. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah. And I think for the people who are watching and listening, it's important for you all to understand, like for me and my polyamorous journey, it's ever evolving. And so for me to put myself into this conversation, I have to think back several years ago
Yeah.
to even when I was very much so steeped in the idea of having partners, which I'm not so much now. And I haven't been for the last, 2 to 3 years. But the relationships that I'm talking about, they go back,
Years.
6, 7 years ago, 4 years ago with the other one when we first met. So,
Oh my.
it's so many.
It's been long. Oh
Yeah,
my gosh.
yeah, it's been
Dang,
so
we
long.
actually probably been together like twice as long as you. Dang, time is moving.
Time is moving. So,
We walking down memory lane over here.
by the time Shani and I met, I had drawn this line in the sand around like just the different ways I'm not doing labels, hierarchy, and things have been way more fluid. So for me to have this conversation, I'm going back. We can bring it to the present and lean more into kind of give them some more context about how we see
Yeah.
our current dynamics.
I definitely want to do that. And it's coming up now. And I think
Hmm.
that I want to definitely talk about that.
Yeah.
Um, so I'm going to talk a little bit about like some meta experiences I have had too. I talked about my first one. And interestingly, I got to get a little glimpse of Sunjata as a meta in that situation also, and the person I was dating at the time. Um, it was interesting because the person I was dating was one of the people who he kind of had some friction kind of with
Hmm.
before we had even started dating.
Yeah.
So it's very complex, right?
Very
All of these
complex.
things are very intertwined. You'll
Yeah.
see we're in a very small community around here. So like it feels a little incestuous sometimes. Um, but it was an interesting dynamic. I got to get a glimpse of some competition or some feelings of competition, not really from Sunjata, more from the person who I was dating. There was some feelings of like competition and comparison. So I got a little glimpse into that. And then when Sunjata and I got more involved, I had a meta. You know, I now had a meta, a new meta. And I didn't find that one to be particularly easy. I didn't find that meeting or that um, encounter to be easy. Not as easy as my first meta, right? My first meta was like, hey, come through. Second meta was more worried, I think, felt more concerned about her significance in your life because the way Sunjata and I got together, like we've talked about it before, but it feels very like magical. It feels like, oh my gosh, we're so aligned. And so I can really understand how if you're in a relationship that feels like you might be getting sidelined, how that can feel, right? It can feel like you might be losing your significance. It feels like you might not be as important to that person anymore. And so I think some feelings of insecurity came up
Yeah.
for my meta, and it definitely caused a rift
Mhm.
because, you know, when that insecurity comes up, a lot of times it's hard to not take it out. It's hard. You're not going to take it out on the person you love, right? You're not going to express that insecurity and jealousy kind of brings some anger up, you know? And it's hard to take that out on the person you love. So I feel like I got a little bit of that. Like you did, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
I got a little bit of that. And so it's been hard for me to get over, if I'm being real. Like it's just been hard for me to move past that. Even though I think my meta is trying to move past it, I myself am struggling to move past it. So
Yeah.
this issue for me has probably been the most sensitive of all the issues that come up in polyamory. This is the one I've struggled with the most. I don't really have the same struggles, I think, as a lot of other people have in polyamory, but this one, I do relate to this one.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's important to note that, we're sharing our experience and like this is so dynamic, so complex, so nuanced because we all approach these things differently. And the people that we're referring to, obviously they're not here to give their side of things and how they experience things. But I always like to bring that into our podcast and that awareness that we are aware. And I think I could speak for Shani in that way as well, that like we're aware that you all are getting our perspective, but there's other perspectives as well. So I just want you all to keep that in mind that like we're not saying that all we can give is our perspective and we respect that other people have their experience of us and those situations as well. I just want to bring that awareness into this. Hope you're enjoying this episode. Let's take a quick break to tell you about something that we've been working on.
We're excited to announce our course and coaching program, Relationship Bliss, where we help polyamorous people transform their relationships into highly compatible, peaceful, deeply aligned, and blissful partnerships.
We do this by sharing techniques for effective communication, deeper connection, and conflict resolution. The program offers a self paced course with 5 learning modules, 25 training videos, and live virtual coaching sessions with us, Shani and Sunjata.
Learn more at go-growdialogue.com.
Thanks for listening. Now back to the show. Um,
And it's definitely no, like, I feel like the way, even the way we're talking, there's no shade. Like, we
yeah,
are humans,
yeah,
okay? We
we
are
understand.
human beings. These emotions are complex.
Hmm.
These emotions are hard to deal with, and they're completely natural.
Yeah,
And including my own reaction, you know, including my reaction and his reaction to how we feel, you know, like how we experience things. These are our own human emotions, like he's saying,
hmm,
and we all have them.
yeah,
So absolutely no shade, no, like he said, no blaming and shaming. We've all
hmm,
felt insecure
yeah,
before.
yeah,
We've all felt jealous before. We've all taken things out on the wrong or have had misplaced emotions before.
yeah,
So no shade,
yeah.
no shade.
And then, so with that being said, I want to give y'all, I'm gonna keep it real with y'all. Like, there's been some real like head butt moments that I've had with one meta in particular, um, where things have gotten really, really tense. Um, and, on numerous occasions that things have gotten really, really tense. And it's challenged me. And I know that it's challenged him as well. One thing that I can say that I'm grateful for, because we are still in each other's lives, because of a shared love that we have, is that we've always found a way to come back to respect and cordiality, because of our shared love. We've had times where we've butted heads in those ways, but then we've had conversations where we've sat down one to one to air things out, where we've gone out and had a drink just to figure out and get back on the same page when things got really, really tense, and we've done the work in that way, where neither one of us wallow too long in the tension. I could think of like even the latest one that we have, which was, over a year ago, the most recent one, over maybe even a year and a half or so ago, where we got on the phone immediately and sorted out like what went left. And we're able to find our way back to some common understanding. So I do want to say that, that's a part of the work that's in this journey. It's not something that I ever imagined. I kind of had this idea that, we're all non-monogamous, polyamorous. We would all kind of go along and get along. And it just hasn't been the case. It's been really, really challenging. And it's challenged my relationship with my love as well, where I'm like, do I really want to stay in this relationship in in the context that we're in if I got to continue to, experience this meta tension, or if it's causing this much upheaval in your life, maybe I should take a step back because I don't want you to continue to cause for my presence to continue to cause such an upheaval in their lives. But one thing I've learned though, a lot of times if there's already upheaval in their lives, my presence, it's not really my presence that's the root of it. That's what I can say. I think that a lot of times there's already some upheaval, and then my presence just adds, another log onto the fire per se.
So I wrote an article about Metamour relationships on our Substack, why can't I remember it right now? Sustainable Solutions Media.com. There we go. And a lot of people thought I was writing about my own experiences, but a lot of it was about this particular meta relationship, just from my own observations,
Mhm.
not even from necessarily things he said, but just from being in their presence. You can kind of like some of those things come from his experience too. I don't always just write about my own personal experience. Um, I think that what you said there is a lot of times what's going on between the metas is actually a symptom of what is happening in their relationship.
Mhm.
So I think what you were saying is that, and you can correct me, is that there was already kind of some issues in their relationship. And so that has kind of translated into meta problems.
Yes,
I
definitely.
think a lot of times when there's insecurity in a relationship, and I'm using insecurity meaning fear, a lot of fear, or there's insecurity within a relationship. I think being the meta relationship suffers
Indeed.
because of that.
Indeed. Indeed. Yeah.
Um, I think of how it does kind of feel natural to feel what you call the twinge, though,
Yeah.
right? When it comes to meta. So you want to tell them what you about the twinge?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I didn't make this term up. But it's one I've seen people in the polyamorous groups that I've been in use, and then I adopted it because it makes sense, where basically whenever if I'm in a relationship with someone and they start dating and relating with someone new, there's this like feeling in my body, or in my stomach of like discomfort. It's like those internal feelings of jealousy or envy get triggered, and it's a body response that folks call the twinge, and I've definitely experienced that, in my journey.
I felt the twinge. I felt the twinge before.
Mhm.
It's this kind of like it's probably like your sympathetic nervous system just kind of revving you up a little bit, giving you a little bit of those stress hormones because you feel a little threatened.
Mhm.
Um, you start wondering, what if this person, are they going to like this other person more than me? Are they going to, are y'all going to have sex? Are you going to do this? Are you going to do that? And you start wondering about what they're going to do instead of like keeping your eyes on your own paper. It's totally normal.
Yeah.
Um, I think we're conditioned this way.
Yeah,
So
definitely. We grew up in a mononormative culture, so we're conditioned this way. So a lot of this, that's a part of the work that you'll hear people talk about in polyamory. It's just learning to experience those things and not wallow in them and move and learning how to move through them. Um, but I think this is a good time to talk about like what is some of your reflections on yourself as a meta? Um, yeah.
I personally, well, I'll be honest, when it comes to conflict, especially with people who mm, I don't necessarily feel deeply connected to, I will just avoid it. Um, I don't, in the same way that Sunjata's like, after we have a disagreement, after my meta and I had a disagreement, we get on the phone and we talk about it. Yeah, I'm probably not going to do that. I don't I'm more avoidant in those ways. So I know that's frustrating to I think that's one of the frustrating things about me as a meta is I'm not very willing um to get into like a conflict conversation with that person. I'm more likely to just be like, you know what, we don't have to relate. We're fine. We don't I'll be over there. So especially when my feelings, are hurt, I can be very avoidant.
Hmm.
I felt like I feel like one of my hopes in polyamory was to have wonderful meta relationships. I feel like one of my greatest hopes was that I was going to be besties more with my meta, Um like I would be open to a friendship with a meta. I would be open to something romantic with a meta. So I was hoping for that. I was hoping for at least something like that. We're going to talk about like terms, different types of arrangements,
Hmm.
but I was definitely hoping for more of the close lap sitting KTP, that's kitchen table. We'll get there in a second. I was hoping for that.
Yeah.
And when it wasn't happening, I think I just ran away. And that's my go-to avoidance.
Yeah.
So I think that would be very frustrating for somebody who wants to be a meta with me after a rift, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. I think for me personally, whenever I've been in these relationships, I've always shown up with a very, very much so with an open heart and an open mind. Not wanting to force a relationship with the meta in terms of like a close friendship, but always showing up cordial, respectful, open to conversation, open to hanging out. Um, and also really, really trying not to take things personal as much as possible. And I'm sure that I have some blind spots in terms of ways that I've shown up that have triggered metas that I'm unaware of, and that I'll say it wasn't intentional because I personally, and you can correct me if you can, sometimes Shanny can remember things that I'm just not thinking about, and I'm open to that. But I don't think that I've brought any like competitive energy into any of my meta relationships. Like I just wanted to fit in. I just wanted to, again, my whole mindset has always been, how can we collaborate to love this person that we have in common? Like that's always been my mindset. That's always been the way I like to show up is I want to partner and collaborate to love this person and make them feel special and supported and secure and safe. Um, I've never felt threatened by any type of meta relationship. Um, you know, or like yeah, it's just I've never wanted to compete. That's my energy. Um, at the greatest hopes, and I still carry these hopes of, I would love to have like what we call a polycule where there's just closeness and support and like life support, like practical life support where I could pick up the phone and know that, if you need something or if I need something, you got my meta has my back and vice versa. And I can honestly share there have been times where that has happened. There's been times where because one particular love of mine, we've been in each other's lives for almost 7 years now. And there have definitely been times where we've had to like communicate over children and like support of going to watch games, or like, hey, I'll pick up your son, or I'll watch your son because y'all want to go on vacation. Like I've done that. I've shown up and stayed at my love's home because her and her partner wanted to go on vacation, and I watched their kids. Like that's the type of like dynamics that I want to be a part of, where we're really in each other's lives and we're caring for each other, and it's just more village. That I would say that's my greatest hopes, to continue to build on that, and to attract that, going forward.
I agree with you. I will say, when it comes to like, I do think you show up in a way that is, community based for sure. Like you're very communal, you're very much wanting to support and be there for everyone in, you know, who's related or not related, but who's like involved with the people who you love. You know
Yeah,
what I mean?
yeah.
Um, but I will say, when competitive energy, when you're met with competitive energy, and I'm talking about you, but I'm also talking generally, it's very hard not to meet competitive energy with competitive energy. Because if you don't, what will happen? So there have been times where you were met with competitive energy and had to kind of defend yourself almost, if that makes sense. Like, um, so I do think there are times when it can be hard to know what to do.
Hmm. Hmm.
I do think there have been times when, your actions have been interpreted as competitive,
Okay.
even if that's not how you intended it. And
Yeah.
I think the same thing can be said for me also.
Yeah.
Um, what I have hopes, the same hopes you have. Like I want village. I always say that's what I really came here for, more than I came here for the sex and the romance and the other things. I really came to polyamory for that. And one of my fears is that, it's never going to happen.
Hmm.
Like one of my fears is that I'm never going to have that. I'm never going to have a good meta relationship.
Mm.
I'm never going to have a close meta relationship. Like that's something that I definitely worry about
Yeah.
because I want it.
And let's say one that sustains, because you mentioned your first meta relationship was good, but it didn't sustain in terms of closeness for a long period of time.
Yeah, because we weren't aligned.
Okay.
I'm gonna be like that. I wasn't aligned. I love. I still like these people. They're still in a sphere. Like they're still in the outer skirts of my sphere. I like them, but we're not aligned. Like we don't have the same values. We don't have the same. So that's really what I'm looking for. But I love her still. I still love her energy, but I don't think we're like.
Well, I
You
mean,
know.
yeah, but that's my point. That's why we haven't spent a lot of time
Yeah.
since, it's been years since you've been close to that person, and,
Yeah.
and that's the reason.
That is the reason, but it's not because of, meta tension.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
that's exciting. You know
yeah,
what I mean?
yeah. And that's what I'm saying. Like when you say you want that, I'm saying you want that to sustain,
I do. I want
uh,
that to sustain. I want that to sustain.
something like that to sustain.
Or yeah, I want something that feels like, yeah, more close knit. Like you can pick up the phone and be like, hey, help me out type.
Yeah. One point I would like to make, even when you mentioned the idea of me having to meet competition at times, or me having certain blind spots at times, you know, um, even though, if you've been watching this podcast for a while, you know that we also are like communicators. We teach and train communication. And that doesn't mean that we're going to always be perfect at it. That's why we need tools to how to like resolve conflict when it arises. And one thing that I remember saying to one of my metas several years ago was, "I'm not perfect. I know that I have blind spots, and if I trigger you, unintentionally, please let me know so that I can give you the full context, or I can clarify, or I can just apologize. And then we can figure out a way to move forward where we're solid again." I remember having that conversation with a meta, and he was more avoidant. He never took me up on that. I would hear stuff from other people that he had an issue with me about,
Hmm.
but he would never come to me directly.
So that's
Um,
the meta I'm definitely talking about. And also your other meta, you've been met with competition in ways where you had to react that I think you had to react in a way that you didn't necessarily want to.
yeah.
Um, but I think exactly what you're saying there is that you can want to do the work.
Yeah.
You can want to do the communication, but what about the other person? Like what
Hmm.
about that other person? Are they willing to, and are y'all willing to do it at the same time?
Yeah.
Because sometimes one of you is ready and the other one isn't,
Right.
or vice versa.
Yeah.
And so it's just so complex,
Yeah. Yeah.
And when you feel, even though we definitely feel like love is infinite, time and resources aren't, they aren't. And so it can definitely feel scary. I don't think I've ever felt threatened either necessarily, because I like to think that my own relationship has its own inherent value that, can't be replaced.
Yeah.
I like to think that I'm irreplaceable in those ways.
Yeah.
So I don't feel threatened, but I do understand why other people might,
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's complex. It's
Yeah.
super complex.
So for those of you who are polyamorous and you're watching this as well, let us know how some of your meta experiences have been. Share it in the comments. If you're watching this on YouTube, if you're watching this on Substack, we would love to hear some of your experiences. Have they been positive? Have they been negative? Have they been a combination of both? Let us know. And I could definitely say, there's definitely people that I know that have some thriving meta relationships,
Yes.
people who are like in it with each other. And when they have rifts, they're willing to do the work together and they're really doing the whole kitchen table polyamory thing and putting in the work in. So with that being said, I think it's a great time.
Hopes. I do want to say, I do have hopes. I have hopes that that will happen
Hmm.
here also when it's organic and authentic and all of those things. I
Yeah,
think it will come together.
yeah, yeah. And then also, I guess to put a bow on it as well, with our like more fluid connections, we do have meta-ish type relationships that we are able to be in more of a kitchen table, polyamory vibe with. When I think about like a common connection that we both share, that we're both cool and close to. Um, and then also, like you said, you're the one woman that's more local that you spend time with that has more been more fluid and everything. We vibe, we do kitchen table, we're able to be in each other's presence, etc. Um, and even the one relationship where we did a skit on about the first time I asked if you were in love with someone else, like that guy, he and I are really cool, and I've always really enjoyed and been able to talk to him and vibe with him. So
He's like a perpetual meta for you. You and
true, true,
it's interesting because in this small community, I feel like there's like a few guys who kind of have a lot of loves in common. They
yeah.
have a lot
And
of,
a few women have a lot of loves in
and a
common.
few women who have some people in common. I feel like there's more overlap with the guys, which is interesting. But
Hmm.
um yeah, I would say you and him have a good meta relationship. I would say that's probably the best meta relationship because y'all are just chill.
Yeah,
Um and I think that even within our meta relationships where we struggle, he said it, we have found ways to still be in community,
hmm,
because we're still connected in other ways. So
hmm,
even with the people who we don't necessarily feel close to, we still find ourselves being close to them
yeah,
sometimes. We just kind of want like I think more organic,
yeah,
more authentic.
yeah,
So speaking of which, let's get into our segment. What you
yeah.
think?
Let's do it. Let's move towards our segment, which is consensual non-monogamy terms.
We're gonna teach y'all some vocabulary.
Yeah, we've been using some of it here, and I think this is the perfect episode to give you some more details. We could probably tie it into the whole meta dynamic. It's because that's what a lot of it is about. So,
And I feel like I'm gonna link the article I wrote about this in the comments
yeah,
because I actually talk about all of these terms we're about to talk about there, and I give some like advantages and disadvantages of each one, and I get into metamour relationships like challenges. So I'll probably link that in the description.
all right. So let's talk about don't ask, don't tell. DADT. What does that mean?
What does it mean? What does it sound like?
Don't ask, don't tell. Whatever you're getting into, I don't want to know.
Really? I mean, this one is an interesting one to me because I always wonder if you are nested and you're DADT and you're about to go out with somebody, do you just say, "All right, I'm going out"?
That's it. Yeah, and the don't ask, don't tell dynamic. That's it. Like all that your love wants to know is you're going out and you're coming home. They don't want to know any other details in between. And that's some people have that, and it's very interesting. And I think like everything's on the spectrum. So I think some don't ask, don't tell. Some people are like literally, I don't want to know nothing. And some people are like, well, at least tell me where you're going. You don't gotta tell me who, like it could be where you're going and who you're going with, but nothing else in between. So I think there's always like a spectrum, in that.
think don't ask, don't tell is more on the non-monogamous side than it is on the polyamorous side.
Mhm.
Um, because don't ask, don't tell literally means you're going out with somebody, you don't know this person's name. If we're getting to like the extremes,
True.
right? You don't know this person's name, you don't even know, you know nothing about them, you don't even know how your partner is involved with that person, right? It means do what you want, you have a hall pass to do whatever you want. I don't want to know anything about it at all. A little bit like away from that, a little step away from that is parallel,
Right.
in which parallel is more like you know who they are interacting with, you know some basics about them, but you don't interact with them.
Yeah.
So like don't ask, don't tell is like you might pass that person on the street, you don't even know their name.
Mhm.
Parallel is like I know your name, I might have seen a picture of you, but other than that, we don't interact ever.
Yeah, and we call it like parallel poly. That's like that what that is called. And with parallel poly, you even would know the extent. Like, do we, that your partner or love is in a romantic relationship with someone. You may know they're going on trips together and stuff, but it's just you don't want to intersect. You don't want to cross paths with that person. In a parallel dynamic, you want to keep your lives completely separate.
I think we've only ever had one, and since we've been together, one parallel situation. I was dating somebody for about 3 months, and I think he's the only person I've ever dated in this time that you never met.
Okay. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so I think that's the only time we were parallel. But you knew where I was, you knew he existed. I
Yeah.
told you about him a little bit.
Hmm.
But we were kind of parallel.
Yeah. I wouldn't know him if I saw him.
Yeah, you would have known. You saw him,
Yeah.
which okay, well, let's continue.
Yeah, yeah. All right, so the next term is called garden party. And garden party is again moving along that spectrum towards more enmeshment, or is where if you're in a social setting with your partner's partner, your love's love, that you all would be cordial, shake hands, give each other a hug, and then just socialize and mingle in each other's presence, but you're not totally parallel where you're not seeing each other at all.
You basically only see each other at group events.
Right.
So that's where the term garden party comes from. You're basically only seeing each other when you and your partner are socializing in a place where that person might also be socializing. Maybe they're with their partner also, or maybe not. But y'all kind of just hang out. Maybe you'll even catch up. How you doing? How are the kids? How's life? All right, see you later. And then you don't see them again for like, 3 months because
Right.
that's the next social event.
Right. All right. So the next term that we use on this spectrum of enmeshment,
Kitchen table.
kitchen table poly,
And
KTP.
I feel like this is a lot of people's goal. I feel like whenever you ask in the community what kind of like dynamics people want within their polyamory, they often say kitchen table polyamory. So this is basically exactly what it sounds like. We can get together at the kitchen table, and that could be any day of the week, not just when we're, having a social event. So
Yeah.
it's like, hey, come through, come say hi, come hang out. Oh, you hanging out with our boo? Yay. Nice to see you.
Yeah. Let's break
Let's
bread
hug.
together.
Yeah, come over for dinner.
Yeah.
This is what we're talking about when we say things like, can you pick my kids up?
Right.
Can you stay here? This is the polycule energy that I think a lot of people desire.
Yeah. I think it has something to do with the fact that, one of the biggest things about polyamory is our capacity to love. Polyamory is multiple loves. And I think that a lot of us get into this with that heart space of being so open and so optimistic about all the love we're going to attract into our lives.
Yes.
And we wanted to just be all love, loving our love, loving our loves, loves, their children, their family. And it's just
True.
big village of love. And so I think a lot of people come into it, with the heart of one in KTP. And the interesting thing is I've seen so many people in our online groups and Facebook where folks are like, I came in that way, but I don't want that anymore
Yep.
because it's too hard, it's too
Yep.
complex. Some people are scorned because of
Yep.
some of the issues that y'all heard us talk about, in the first segment of the show. So it's interesting to see how these things evolve and people move in and out of their desires in this way.
I do think some people have this, they have this KTP vibe. Um, and it's always easy to be unhappy and loud, you know?
True.
So it's like but I do think a lot of people have this and they're
Oh
just
yeah.
quiet about it,
Yeah.
because they're
Yeah.
happy, they're
Yeah.
fulfilled, so they're not complaining, they're not, super vocal about it.
Yeah. And there's
Um,
people who are vocal about their KTP, or we can just see it, in the
yeah,
pictures,
yeah,
when you go to the social events and you
yeah,
hear the stories. There's a lot of people thriving in KTP vibes. Indeed,
definitely.
indeed.
Definitely. And then you go one step further, and this one is relatively new. I have relatively new to me anyway, is lap sitting. And this is like one step beyond KTP. KTP is like we're all one big happy family. Lap sitting is more like, you might be involved with your meta. You might be like more could be intimately involved with your meta. I would say we have one like dynamic like that where we have, I think that's when you were talking about Comet.
Comment. Yeah.
Say, I would call her more of an LDR than I would call her a Comet,
Okay.
because a Comet to me is somebody who I kind of check up on, sometimes, but
Hmm.
I talk to her almost a lot.
Yeah.
So I would call her an LDR for me. And Sunjata also has a relationship with her that's like separate but also together. So that
Yeah.
feels lap sitting.
Yeah.
Like when she's here, we will all sit on whoever's lap.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like we might both sit on his lap.
Right. Right.
So that's like a lap sitting kind of energy that I desire. That's like what I would prefer, honestly.
Yeah.
Somewhere between KTP and lap sitting, that's where I like to be.
Yeah, and that's definitely my dream dynamic as well. It's always been my dream dynamic since I've gotten started dating and relating as a polyamorous person, is to have like lap sitting dynamics and that level of closeness and love and intimacy, to be able to share it amongst multiple people in that way. It just feels dope. I've always said, it'd be dope to love someone who loves someone I love. Like, so that's such a beautiful thing. And like romantic love, is the way I'm speaking of it in that way when I say that. And while we do have that LDR, long distance relationship dynamic, I'm that's one of my hopes, is that we can cultivate that
Locally.
locally, in a more high touch, enmesh type way. So, we'll see what the future brings.
And then we have one of the best terms. I think is just such a clever term, hinge. The hinge is the person, the shared partner. Um, so hinges, there's a saying, right? There are no meta problems, only hinge problems. Basically saying that metas never have issues with each other. It's because of whatever the hinge is doing that causes the tension between metas.
Mm,
Um,
that's a whole show. Let's not go too deep on that.
it's in my article. I have a whole little section
That's
on
a
that.
whole show.
You don't want to get into that, it's sensitive. No, I'm just joking. I'm
I
totally
would love to do a
joking.
show on that though.
You want to get into it? You want to do a show just about being a hinge
Yeah,
and like what it's like? Oh my gosh,
yeah.
let's write that down. Um, I think being a hinge is hard. You never know what you're doing because you love two people, especially when there's tension between them. You just don't know what to do.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I have like a whole section about that, about how being a hinge is hard.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
when there's tension. I feel like when there's not, though, being a hinge is probably pretty great.
yeah, yeah. Yep. So, I'm the hinge, for example, between um Shani and then my other long-term love. Like, I'm the hinge. They only come into each other's contact because of me. They come together when I have birthday parties and outings and things like that, and I'm the one in between. So that's what they mean by, or that's what hinge
It's
means.
the partner you share, basically. It's the person, it's your shared love.
Yeah.
um it's kind of interesting because there's friendship hinges also
Hmm.
that I feel like get because it's not romantic, because romance is hierarchical,
Yep.
but there are some major hinge problems with friends also. I've definitely seen that before, where a friend gets introduced into like a friend group, or you introduce a friend to another friend and there's tension. So hinges can exist in other relationships also, not
Hmm.
just with with with
Romantic.
romantic. It
Yeah.
could even exist in familial relationship,
Indeed. Indeed.
um
And it does.
it absolutely does. Like
Yeah.
I would, when it comes to, he has a co-parent, he's the hinge between his co-parent and me
Indeed.
also,
Yep.
so there's lots of ways to be a hinge.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
have to keep it RA.
Yeah, I love it. I love that you bring that perspective in, for sure. I love it because, Shani and I, just generally speaking, we don't like putting romantic relationships on a pedestal above all the other type of relationships that we have. So I'm glad that you brought that in.
Yay.
Yeah, yeah.
I actually feel like there's so much more we could talk about with this. There might even be like a part two of this episode because I feel like there's stuff that we didn't even touch on that we could get into. And I'm sure this episode is getting long. So we're
Yeah,
going to wrap it up.
yeah, yeah.
Next time, next season, we definitely got to put the Hinge episode on there because then we can get into more of what
Hmm.
I'm thinking about in this situation.
Hmm.
But I hope y'all learned something. I
Yes.
hope you found this interesting, and I hope you will share some of your experiences with us also, especially if you've got some positive ones. I would love to hear some positive meta relationships. But tell us your negative ones too, you know, your challenges.
Hmm.
So
Yeah, yeah.
interested in what y'all have to say about this.
So thank y'all for being with us once again. And until next time, we love y'all. Peace. That's a wrap for this episode of SunShan and Rainbows. We hope today's conversation sparked some new insights, deep reflections, or just gave you a fresh perspective on love and connection.
We'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop us a comment, send us your questions, or share your own experiences. We might even feature them in a future episode.
And don't forget to subscribe to SunShan and Rainbows on YouTube and your favorite podcast platform so you never miss an episode. And if you're vibing with us, please like, comment, share, and leave a review. It helps others find the show and keeps these conversations going.
Want more SunShan and Rainbows? Follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at SunShan Rainbows for daily insights, behind the scenes moments, and updates on future episodes.
Until next time,
We
we love y'all. Peace.